Hello, college biology students. I see that I'm not connected. There we go. So we're going to jump in. I posted a video yesterday that kind of gave you that overview of photosynthesis, the crash course video. So I'm going to jump right into notes. A lot of this is review from 10th grade biology. We're just going to go into a little bit more detail in this process. We only have this week and next week left in this semester for this class. So there's still a genetics component that I want to get to. I am feeling a little bit behind. So we're going to kind of do a quick overview and then test on photosynthesis and respiration. So I'll update the timeline in your HyperDoc in the weekly schedule. Looking at a test on Friday, just so you know. All right, so photosynthesis, the process by which that energy is captured from the sun. We're going to break that down into two general groups, if you will. So we have the process of capturing energy from the sunlight, and then we have the second process, which we call the light independent reactions, where a lot of important stuff happens. That's actually where the glucose is made. So we're going to look at those separately. The entire process of photosynthesis is, however, represented by this equation: some carbon dioxide, some water, and then light energy from sunlight. Those are the reactants. And then the products are that glucose, C6H12O6, that formula, and then oxygen. Thank goodness for us, because that's actually what we need. This taking in of the carbon dioxide and the giving off of oxygen occurs through these stomata in the leaves. So these are really important, these little pores. Think of like pores in your skin. But this takes in, so we have CO2 that's taken in to the plant, and then we have this wonderful oxygen and also some water vapor given off in that gas exchange of those stomata. So within those pores. So they're really, really important. So we already talked about respiration, which is the breakdown of those molecules into usable energy like ATP. And I mentioned this when we talked about, let me pick a different color. When we talked about respiration, we said, oh, look at this. We see the products of cellular respiration being really essentially the same as the reactants in photosynthesis. And then the products, yellow, the products of photosynthesis are really what gets used up as reactants in cellular respiration. So for plants, it's because that's the stuff they made in photosynthesis, but for us, it's because we ate the things that, get broken down and eventually combined into energy. The difference also is that energy, when we're talking about cellular respiration, is really in that form of ATP. Energy in photosynthesis is really that light energy that comes from the sun. But if you can memorize one, you kind of know them both. So just really quickly, so we lump these into, all living things can either be lumped into autotrophs or heterotrophs, right? If you're making your own food, you're an autotroph. So that's plants, algae, some bacteria, some protists fall into that category as well. Heterotrophs, however, would be more like we are heterotrophs. We can't make our own food from sun, so we fall into the category of heterotrophs. So this chart then is just a quick overview of photosynthesis. So we said so water goes into the plant through the roots. That's the organ where water is absorbed. And we get some sunlight that actually gets trapped by chlorophyll. That's this magical substance that we completely lack, like we do not have that. And then carbon dioxide enters through those stomata in the leaves. And then what is produced is some oxygen and some sugar, which that's the glucose, some of that glucose is going to get converted into starch for storage. That's why when we eat plants, some plants are very starchy, like potatoes, for example. So some of them have large starch storage. But then we also get oxygen into the air and so forth. So I want to jump into just cover a little bit the historical discovery of photosynthesis. So why were we even looking for photosynthesis, and how did we figure out that there was a process that plants had? So this Jan Baptista van Helmont, and I'm sure I didn't say that right, actually did a really cool experiment. He's from Belgium. He planted a willow tree in a pot, and he had this small willow tree, this pot of soil. He found the mass of everything, so he weighed everything, and then for like 5 years he added only water and nothing else. And the willow trees grow pretty fast, so he found the weight of the willow tree after 5 years, and it was much greater than it was when he started, or he found the mass of the willow tree with the pot and the soil. And the mass had increased dramatically. So he's like, where did that extra mass come from? It wasn't taken from the soil, which is kind of what they thought at the time, that as plants grew, they took stuff from the soil, which we know they do get fertilizer and ions and those kinds of things. However, the mass of the whole system increased a lot. So he's like, okay, there's got to be some mass coming from somewhere else. He didn't really understand the significance of what he had found, because he thought, I think it's just because the tree was taking up water, and that water attributed to the increasing mass. We now know that's really not true. And then Joseph Priestley, so this is quite a while later if you look at the dates. So now we were in the early 1600s, now we're in the 1700s and early 1800s. Joseph Priestley is the one who discovered that living vegetation adds something to the air. So Priestley actually took a sprig of mint and put it in, and I'm thinking a glass dome kind of situation, where a candle had burnt out all of the air, and put this sprig of mint in this jar, and it was able to live. So without the oxygen, they knew that the oxygen was depleted. Or maybe they didn't understand the oxygen. I shouldn't say that, I guess. The sprig of mint grew just fine. And actually, after some time had passed, they found that they could again burn a candle in there. So the stuff that was present in the air that allowed a candle to burn, which we know oxygen is necessary for combustion. So basically, without understanding the whole thing, he kind of proved that oxygen is replenished by plants. Okay, so the candle could burn again after the mint had been in there. And then Joseph Ingenhousz proposed that plants carry out a process that uses sunlight to split carbon dioxide into carbon and oxygen gas. So he's the one that actually first proposed, hey, we think there's this process that, carbon dioxide is split into carbon and oxygen gas, and that oxygen gas is given off in this process. So our objective for this very first part is going to be to explain how plants actually capture energy from sunlight. So how do plants capture energy from sunlight? So if we look at the light absorption that occurs, and that energy absorption that occurs in chloroplasts, it's a pretty complicated process. So we are going to split photosynthesis into those two separate reactions. So I just want to explain a little bit about the structure of the leaf. So if we look at the structure of this leaf, we have kind of a cuticle, which is basically kind of like the skin, if you want to think of it that way. And then the epidermis is the upper layer. And then here we have the first cells that actually contain chlorophyll and these chloroplasts. You'll notice that this is kind of cool. They're very tall and thin and shaped. This allows more cells to be present along this surface, so there's more cells that are actually able to do photosynthesis if they're this structure as opposed to the structure that we see on the inner part of the leaf. So that's important as well. So when we look at a stack of these coin-shaped structures, a stack of these is actually, so here's a stack, that's a granum, or we say a whole bunch of these stacks are actually the grana. Each one of these little coin-shaped things is called a thylakoid. I have a better picture of that actually here. So I think it would be really helpful for you to draw some of that. And we're going to split this whole process into two separate two groups, light dependent, light independent. But we have to understand, so please draw this like this. I use funky colors, I know, but there's a thylakoid, a whole stack of these is a grana or granum. Granum is one, grana is several of them, right? And then I've indicated with yellow, the stroma is just the fluid that's inside that chloroplast. So that's important. There's reactions that take place in the stroma. And so I already have on here light independent reactions. The reactions that are not dependent on sunlight actually take place in the stroma. Light dependent reactions take place inside these thylakoids because that's where the chlorophyll is. Chlorophyll is the only substance that can actually collect that energy from sunlight, so it's really important. So it's all about the chlorophyll when we talk about the light-dependent reactions. It's all about chlorophyll and also these other pigments that are there that also capture energy from the sun. So chlorophyll is the light-absorbing pigment. It appears green because it doesn't absorb much green light. Green is reflected, so that's why it looks green. So we already talked about the structure. The thylakoid, again, this is where those light-dependent reactions occur. Different chlorophyll, there's actually chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B that can absorb different types of light to make it more efficient at getting more of that sunlight. And then the stroma is that protein-rich solution that surrounds the grana, and this is where light-independent reactions occur, which I already stated. And then we have other pigments like carotenoids. These are like the brown, yellow, orange colors, and then xanthophylls, which are the red pigments. There's also kind of purpley pigments and so forth. I'm going to erase the I out of here, even though we kind of write that in there, but this is the visible spectrum, right? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. Sometimes we say indigo. Indigo is actually not really there. We kind of add that in, but it's really not there. So these are the colors of light that are present in sunlight. For a plant, the more of these colors you can absorb, the more energy you're going to get from the sunlight. So that's why those other pigments are really important. And they're there. We see them when the chlorophyll begins to go dormant or die off in the fall. We start to see those other colors of leaves. So they are there more in some plants than in others. So a quick overview. Step 1, light-dependent reactions. Okay, captures the sunlight and the chlorophyll in the thylakoid. Step 2, glucose is made. This actually isn't dependent on sunlight, but it is dependent on some things that are made during those light-dependent reactions. Sometimes we call these dark reactions. We call them that a lot less nowadays than we used to because dark reactions implies that they only happen at night, and that's just simply not true. So in those light-dependent reactions, there's an electron transport chain, kind of similar to what we talked about in cellular respiration, only this time this electron transport chain kind of happens in the beginning. So this is a set of reactions that convert light energy to chemical energy. The first stage converts sunlight into electrical energy. This is the electron transport chain. The second stage converts electrical energy into chemical energy. So some ATP is actually produced in photosynthesis and also some NADPH. We're going to talk about how these photosystems are an important part of that. So they're just kind of all connected chlorophyll molecules. So I've reached my time limit here. I'm going to make another short video to post as well.